magician Leopold Kazsmer, the great enchanter, and his crowd of unusual friends, makes a deadly journey to the Library of the Damned, a structure fluctuating between the worlds, filled with archives of the centuries, to find a way to rescue Leopold's father, who is trapped in the darkest depths of Gehenna, and to break the covenant Leopold has made with the deadly, dreaded Unholy Host. They have suddenly called upon him to fulfill their agreement, and because he is bound to them, he has no hope but to obey. It seems that what they most desire is to destroy Leopold's world. If he can't stop them, he might find himself trapped in the depths of Gehenna for all eternity. With help from Special Inspector Mingli Zhao, the imp, the ghost of Inspector Thacker, the automated Raj, and led by Leopold's demon friend Eurynomos, Gehenna goes to war with England, and all hell literally breaks loose in this final adventure of the Enchanter Chronicles. Written by Jerry Westerson. Narrated by Noah James Butler. Alright, so I am back with the next installment, or final installment, I should say, of the Enchanter Chronicles, the Library of the Damned. I really don't have too much to say pre-review, so let's just jump right into the review, starting with the cover and title. The cover, to me, well, first let me say, I'm going to give this 5 stars. The cover, to me, this is the nicest cover so far of the 3. I actually like this one the most. The title is fine, but it did raise a slight issue for me, which I will talk about when I get to the story section. But with that said, like I said, the title is fine, and this is, in my opinion, the best of the covers. Now moving on to the writing. Once again, I'm going to give this section 5 stars. The writing is very good. I think there are some issues story-wise, but I had no problem with the writing. Now moving into the narration. And if you haven't gotten it from the first 2 videos, this section also gets 5 stars. I think this is one, if not the best, narrator I've ever heard. I've heard some really good narrators, and this guy, Noah James Butler, like I've said in my previous videos, he does an extremely good job. And I can't say enough good things about this narrator. I see a lot of great potential for this narrator and what he does. Now moving on to the story. Now, I was conflicted. It took me a while to really lock in what I was going to score this section. I wanted to score this with a 5 stars. But after a lot of consideration and a lot of thought, I'm actually just going to give it 4 stars. While it is a good finish, somewhat, I feel like there are a few little tiny things that could have been added to really finish the story. Predictably, story-wise, you lose a character, which is kind of to be expected. When you get to a final act, somebody's got to go. You got to lose someone that's been a part of a group in some way or fashion. I honestly thought we were going to lose maybe a couple people, but we only ended up losing one, and the one we lost was a little predictable. I saw it coming the second I knew what was going to happen in the book. I thought if anyone should not go, it's this character, because something's going to happen and this character is not making it back from this. Like I said already, there was a predictable loss. You got to the final book, you're in the final, chapter, you're going to have a loss from the group. I mean, that's just generally how stories work. But this loss, it was done in a way that, like I said, I knew this character was going to go. But it wasn't like it was. Usually the reason writers put in a loss is to drive the characters forward in the final conflict, to push them, to make them have a more of a reason to fight on. That wasn't the case here. In my own book series, The Guardian of Light, in book 5, quite a few characters actually die off. Now, I'm not a writer that believes, I'm just going to kill off characters for the shock value. Whenever I've talked about this with people who have read book 5 of my series, they're curious as to why I killed off so many people. And I tell them, I'm like, well, because these characters that I kill off, they are powerful. And my main character, Shane, relies way too heavily on their support. True, he has the support of the entire North Pole behind him, but these specific characters are the first people he turns to, the first people he expects to get help from. And going into book 6, the final book of my series, I wanted to remove some of the support, so my main character, Shane, had to stand on his own. Had to rely on leading the charge, not being part of the end war. Here, in this book, like I said, we do lose one character, but it doesn't really seem like it's done in a way to really push the characters forward. Another reason I gave this section 4 stars is because we do get some answers to questions, but at the same time, we also get questions left unanswered. Like, one character finally finds out and reveals something about themselves, which is a little confusing because to this point it's been said as one thing and then it turns out to be something different. Unless, well, I can't say unless. I guess, there should have been some explanation as to why this thing would happen and be called one thing by everybody. Like, everybody says, oh, this is what it is. This is what's going on. You need to tell this person about this. And then in the final, I guess spoiler warning if you haven't read it. Stop the video here. Go read it for yourself if you want to be surprised. But one of the characters is told they're part demon. And for the past two books, or at least in the last book, it was very heavily told, oh, well, you got to go tell them. They got to know. And he finally does tell her. And then in this one, it's about, it starts off with her past, and it seems like, oh, well, that might be a main focus. And there's just a lot of confusion with this character and what was said. But ultimately, it turns out she's not even a demon. She's something else completely. And there's no explanation as to, oh, demons are these things, or these things were demons that came to Earth, or something like that. There's no lore or mythology brought in to explain this. Because what she is doesn't scream demon to me. It's a mythological creature more than anything. So, I mean, maybe I'm in a minority boat there, but I feel like a little bit more explanation. Having her meet her parents, too, would have been something, to get a little explanation. I mean, when there was all this build-up saying that she was part demon, I half expected Eurynomos to been her father. And suddenly realized that, he's been coming to Earth and he's had relationships with humans, passing relationships, and this was one of his long-lost children that he fathered while he was on Earth. That's what I was expecting to happen, or something along that line. Or something even bigger, like maybe she was a child of one of the Unholy Hosts, or there's this big bad demon that even the main demon is like worried he couldn't really defeat, that the imp served in the past. I thought maybe they'll make that the father, but no. She turns out to be something different, and we don't get any resolution to that, part of her storyline. Another thing, too, is that although this is marketed and said to be the final book, I feel like the series is left off where there could be more stories. There could be more to this entire series. With the ending the way it is, I feel like they could jump ahead like 5-10 years and have more stories going on with these characters. Actually make some of these characters die. Which ups the ante because now it's less and less. And you can have this family that goes around basically being, avengers of evil. A child who is part creature, part magic user, who is openly brought up by both parents to save the world. I know it's a little bit cliche and it's been done a lot, but the writer could even go to the extent of saying this is like a prophecy child. This is a child who's destined for great things, and you got different forces trying to get at the child, trying to tear the child away from the parents, or even kidnaps the child, and it's up to the parents and their group to go find and rescue the child at some point. I'm just saying, this didn't feel like a real ending. This felt like it could possibly keep going or have more to the story. So that is the reasoning for why I gave it 4 stars. Because for a book that was final, or said to be the final one, it just didn't feel that way. It also did not feel like a lot of the questions were answered. Or I shouldn't say a lot, but some of the questions were not answered. Also, I had a little bit of an issue story-wise with the title. And this is what I was talking about back with the title. While the title is fine, like I said, I have no problem specifically with the title. Everybody keeps calling this the Library of the Damned. And I can maybe understand, that in our world and on Earth, maybe people who have discovered how to get to this place maybe came back and called it that. But I feel like it could have had... It's one of those things that could have had multiple names. And you could have been given a list of like 5 or 6 different other names. Like the Library of Light, or the Library of the Insane, or an Insanatorium, or something. Different worlds, different cultures, which, is what is basically hinted at. That this is the library of basically a multiverse library. From different worlds, from different places. And to believe that everybody and all places would call this the Library of the Damned just didn't quite seem right. So I feel like the author could have taken a little liberty there and said, oh, that's just what you people on Earth call it. But really, this place has so many names. Maybe that's just too cliche. But, I mean, it would have been a little bit more realistic when you're saying that this place exists in multiple places and multiple times. And it's basically like a multiverse nexus. A place between worlds. I would feel that this place would have multiple names. So, like I said, it's not much of an issue. It's just a teeny little nitpick that something else could have been added in. But it was fine for what we got. And like I said, it was perfectly fine for the title. It didn't give anything away by saying that. Although, to be fair, it isn't really the primary focus of the book. The whole library bit takes up such a small portion of the book, but it is a plot element that is necessary to get to where they gotta go in the story. So, I understand why it was used for the title, which is perfectly fine. Now moving on to the characters. And since I already talked about the backstory and all that stuff, that's why I was so confused. I didn't know where I wanted to talk about this. Because I'm going to give the characters 5 stars. Like I said, I already deducted points during the story because I feel like there were unanswered questions with characters. I feel like characters could have had their lore or their story expanded upon. But, I mean, ultimately, the characters were fine. And you did get a lot of good characters. Although, if I was going to nitpick in characters, I will say that maybe one fault is that when the narrator did the voice of a new character that we're just meeting for the first time, this character sounded very familiar to another character to the point when both characters are talking, it was a little bit hard to follow which one was which because the voice he was using was so similar for both. But other than that, like I said, all the characters were fine. You get what you expect from the characters. Aside from the stuff I've already said, I had no problem with it. Now moving into the extras, there weren't really any extras in the book. No. I mean, there was an epilogue, but like I said, that epilogue kind of just feels like a setup for more and it makes you want more. So, like I said, there really was no extras. So I guess moving on to the final score, I'm going to have to give this book a 9 out of 10. Like I said, this did not really feel like a conclusion to the story. Like there could be more. Maybe that's the author's intent to do a new series with a new title and it's like a sequel series, kind of something I'm planning myself. But I don't feel like this is truly the end of these characters. I mean, maybe it could be, but I feel like there is more here that can be done, more that can be explored with these characters. And with that said, I mean, I really don't have much else to say other than, it was good. It was very good. I really enjoyed it. If you are a fan of fantasy and, like old fashioned England, and these are the kind of stories you're into, then I really think you'll enjoy this book. I think you'll enjoy the series. It's definitely worth checking out. Like I said, in the past now 3 videos, I really enjoyed this narrator. He is one of the best. The story is really good. I really enjoyed the story I was given. I do like this kind of stuff. I would not necessarily call this steampunk, so I wouldn't put it in that category. I would definitely say this is more of like almost a modern fantasy. Normally, when you have fantasy books, you always think of knights and castles and wars and fields and swords and shields and wizards and dragons. You think of all these things. You think of the Lord of the Rings or Game of Thrones or something along that line. Whereas this takes place in a time period where there is actually a city, where there is actually a lot more people. There are no more, well, I mean, they're kings, but not kings in the aspect of like knights in shining armor type kings. Like, so, yeah. I This isn't exactly a modern fantasy because it doesn't take place in today's world, but it just easily could. I mean, this is like old Victoria London, which is fine. I think we need a little bit more like this. My series is also is a modern day fantasy. And I really enjoy seeing how the modern world or how a upgraded world from the Lord of the Rings style books would take on using magic and demons and stuff. So this was a really interesting story overall. Now, being that this is the final book in the series, I'm going to say how I would rank this is probably at number 3. I would probably put book 2. While I did love it, I mean, it was really good, but it was a bridge between 1 and 3. Then I would put book 1 at number 2. And finally, I would say book 3 at number 1. Even though I didn't give this a 10 out of 10, and I know I gave 2 a 10 out of 10, but that's how I would rank this entire series. Like I said, 2 is a really good book. It bridges the gap between 1 and 3 perfectly fine, and it sets up book 3 really great. I do like all 3 of these books. They did basically score pretty high on my ranking system, because this is just the kind of story I like. Maybe you would rank these differently. Maybe you would give them different scores based on what you like. But if I was, going to rank them, that's how I'd rank them. 2, 1, 3. So, I want to thank you all for watching my review on this series. I am always looking for new audiobooks to review. So if you are an author and you are checking out this video, please feel free to send me an email asking me that you want me to review your audiobook. And with that said, I will want to thank you all for watching. If you have not, please consider subscribing to this channel. Make sure to click that notification bell so you're notified whenever a new video goes up. I want to thank you all for watching, and I'll talk to you next time.